The sun barely rose that morning, as if the sky itself had turned its face from what was about to unfold. The village of Dalu, tucked deep into a basin where mist clung like regret, was silent. The thatch-roofed homes with their bone-white walls stood hunched like old women keeping secrets. No songs of birth echoed that day. No ululation. Only the tight murmur of midwives behind shut doors, and the long agonizing cries of Adama. She was young, barely 17, her face still holding the softness of girlhood. Her belly had swelled like a promise for months, and though the elders muttered about the moon being wrong the night she first conceived, she had carried the child bravely. Alone, for her husband had died in a storm before she even knew she was with child. She bore the stares and the whispers. She carved hope into each sunrise, tracing the outline of a future that now lay in pieces beneath her. When the cries stopped, the silence was a knife. The midwives unwrapped the baby from bloodied cloth. The child did not move. Its body, small and still, bore no cry, no curl of fingers, no breath. One midwife crossed her chest and turned away. Another looked down at Adama, barely conscious and fading fast. "The child is stillborn," she said flatly. "And the mother, near death." "Then the mourning pit," said the elder who had arrived moments later, leaning on his staff carved from firewood. "No blessing. No delay." "But she is still breathing," whispered the youngest midwife, eyes wide, knuckles pale. "She will not last the night," the elders snapped. "The soil will take her gently." The decision was made. It always was. In Dalu, grief was not only unwelcome, it was forbidden. Death brought shadows, they believed. Too much sorrow could rot a village from within. That was the reason they gave for the mourning pit, a crater of scorched earth beyond the yam fields, where all misfortune births were hidden from the gods. A curse buried was a curse silenced. For generations, mothers like Adama, too broken, too unlucky, had been laid to rest without names, without prayers, without even the dignity of farewell. That night, while the village slept, the mourners dug quickly under the veil of darkness. The pit stank faintly of ash and something far older. The midwives, with blank faces, wrapped Adama and the child together in mourning cloth, gray, frayed, marked with soot. Her head lolled to one side, her breath shallow but present. None of them spoke of it. Not when they placed her body on the earth. Not when they covered it loosely with soil, enough to satisfy tradition but not enough to crush the breath that trembled like a ghost in her chest. The wind was still as they finished. And for a moment, it felt as if the earth held its own breath. Below, beneath the thin veil of soil, Adama's body lay cradled against her child's. Her fingers, still curled with instinct, had slipped around the small bundle beside her. Though she drifted between consciousness and darkness, some primal part of her clung. Her ears rang with silence. Her limbs, heavy with exhaustion and grief, would not move. But inside her chest something pulsed. Not just her own heartbeat. Something deeper. Something older. Something waking. The ground beneath her was not just earth. It felt warm. Like breath. Like flesh. Her mind flickered. She dreamed, or perhaps remembered, stories told by her grandmother of the mourning pit before it bore that name. Of how it had once been a grove, where women came to weep and plant their grief into trees that grew from the sorrow. Before the elders forbade it. Before the soil turned black. Before crying became rebellion. In the dream, she saw a woman of ash standing over her, mouth sewn shut with vines, cradling a child of fire. The woman bent down, placed her hand on Adama's forehead, and whispered without words. When she awoke, if waking was the word, the world was silent. And then, not. There was breath beside her. Not her own. Slow. Shallow. Rhythmic. Her eyes shot open into pitch darkness. The weight of soil above her pressed gently, like a damp blanket, but did not suffocate. She turned her head, and in that pitch dark, her hand moved instinctively toward the child swaddled next to her. She felt warmth. She froze. Her heart leapt in panic, confusion, hope, a tangle of impossible emotions crashing in her like thunder. She pressed her hand to the child's chest. It rose. And fell. Once. Twice. The air caught in her throat. The child, her child, was breathing. A tremor passed through the soil, soft as a whisper. She wanted to scream, to call out, but her throat burned dry. She could not tell if this was miracle or madness. Was she alive? Was she buried? Was she dreaming still? Had she passed into some underworld where sorrow reversed its tide? But then the earth shifted again. This time she felt it more clearly. A movement below her, not just dirt settling but something turning, slithering, pushing against the old roots and rock. The soil warmed further, a slow heat like coals buried deep. A sound emerged, soft like humming. No language. No voice. Just vibration pressing against her bones. She clutched the child to her chest, heart pounding. And then fingers. Not hers. Not the child's. Fingers pressed through the dirt beside her leg, thin, dry but impossibly strong. They moved the soil with deliberate grace, brushing past her, curling around something just below her. A moment later they vanished, retreating into the darkness. The hum deepened. The air thinned. Adama knew she should be terrified. But something in her, something ancient, buried, inherited, felt no fear. Instead, she remembered her grandmother's words, whispered when the moon was full and the wind blew backward. Some wombs birth life. Others, death. But once in a generation, a woman births what was never supposed to sleep. She did not know how long she lay there, arms around her child, listening to the movements beneath her, the breath of earth, the hum of memory. But eventually the soil above her began to flake. Cracks appeared in the crust. Light, faint, pale, moon-washed, slipped through. A fox sniffed at the disturbed mound and darted away, yelping. And in that moment Adama knew, something had shifted. Not just her survival. Not just the impossible breath of her child. But something older. Something that remembered being buried. Something that had heard her scream even when the world above had silenced it. And it had stirred. The village slept, unaware. The elders snored in their reed mats, dreaming of power and forgetting the stories they once feared. But in the morning pit, below shallow earth, a mother held her breathing child, and the soil remembered. Adama could not tell how long she had drifted in that dim, earthen cradle. Time did not move here. The heartbeat she felt was not just her own. It pulsed with something steadier, something impossibly constant. The tiny rhythm of life nestled against her. Her lips, caked with damp soil, refused to part. Her limbs ached with stillness. Yet the warmth beneath her arms was undeniable. The child, the one they called Stillborn, was breathing. Adama dared not move too fast. Her ribs groaned as she shifted slightly, dislodging a small clump of earth from her chest. Her hands, weak but certain, slid around the small, swaddled form. Its breath, faint and soft, warmed her knuckles. The cloth was damp but intact, its fibers clinging to skin. And under that, unmistakably, was life. Not a twitch of nerves or post-mortem spasm, but breath, movement, being. She should have wept. But tears would have only turned to mud here. Instead, something deeper moved through her, not relief, not even confusion. Reverence. She exhaled slowly, soil shifting with the breath that escaped her nostrils. Above her face, the weight of packed earth bowed gently inward, pressing down with a patience that seemed almost considerate. This was not death. Not exactly. This was something older. A place that remembered when God still crawled through roots, when screams planted seeds and grief carried teeth. Her back throbbed as she pulled herself an inch sideways. The baby stirred. No cry. No whimper. But she felt it, the child's face turning slightly toward hers as though drawn by scent or soul. Her legs twitched and hit something hard. Stone. Flat. Carved. A shape not made by nature but placed here, deliberate, ancient. She let her fingers explore it, brushing soil aside. Not letters but symbols, a spiral, a fong, an open mouth. They pulsed faintly beneath her palm, a thrum she felt in her jaw more than her ears. The child shifted again. A breath, then another. And then, a sound. Soft. Dry. Like cracked lips moving beneath heavy breath. Not the child. Not herself. From somewhere below or beyond. A voice whispering. Not words she understood. But they knew her. The markings beneath her hand began to warm. And with that heat came sensation she hadn't noticed before. A tingling along her back, a warmth under her skin. Not sweat. Not fever. But something alive inside her. Adama gasped. This time her lips parted. Just enough. Dirt slipped inside. She coughed, panicked. The cough bloomed into a tremor that passed from her throat into the earth around her. She froze, fearing the collapse of her fragile tomb, but the soil only sighed and shifted as though making room. And then her skin began to itch. Not from insect bites or grime. From underneath. Tiny pulses raced up her arms, along her chest. As though roots were unfurling inside her, curling through her veins. Her skin glowed faintly in the pitch black. She could not see it, but she felt it, like the memory of light against closed eyelids. Something was blooming beneath her skin. And it felt like home. The baby pressed closer. Its cheek found her collarbone. Another whisper, louder this time. The voice not around her now but within. We remember. We heard you. Adama tried to speak, but her throat clenched. The soil had not let her voice return. Not yet. Still the message was clear. She had screamed, into the fire, into the betrayal, into the silence. And someone, had listened. She was not alone in the dark. She had been buried, but not to die. She had been sown. The warmth inside her grew. And with it so did something else. A shape in her mind. A memory not her own. A procession of women, eyes hollow with loss, walking into a pit. A cradle carved into the ground. A promise whispered through generations. One would return. One would speak from the silence. Her baby sighed in sleep. And for the first time since the pain, since the betrayal, since the fire and the grave, Adama did not feel broken. She felt filled. Darkness had claimed her. But inside it, something sacred had taken root. Not vengeance. Not despair. A beginning. The soil cradled her gently. And underneath her skin, something waited, breathing, growing, remembering. The first breath Adama took above the soil sliced through her throat like thorns. Cold air stabbed into her lungs, making her gasp and cough until mud and bile sprayed onto the ground before her. The sound echoed in the dead silence of dawn, and when she looked up, face streaked with blood, dirt packed into her lashes, she saw the sky blushing pink with disbelief. In her arms the child was still warm, still breathing. Eyes closed, lips silent. She had clawed her way out of the mourning pit. No one ever had before. The villagers came running when they saw the disturbed earth. 2 women screamed. A boy dropped his basket and fled. An elder dropped to his knees and began to mutter a protection chant through clenched teeth. But no one came forward to help her. They stared as if she were a creature dragged from the belly of something ancient. Adama stumbled forward. Her legs trembled from hours, or was it days, of burial, and she leaned heavily on a tree trunk, cradling the infant to her chest. Emery. That was the name that came to her, unbidden, fierce. Emery, the one who returned. He should not live, hissed one of the elders. It is a curse. A trick of the old spirits. She is dead. She died. We all saw it. Another voice, uncertain, like someone trying to convince themselves of the obvious. But Adama did not speak. Her throat still bore the memory of choking soil. Her lips stayed sealed, not by force but by choice. Instead, she turned, holding the child close, and walked into the forest, never once looking back at the people who had once called her daughter, sister, neighbor. The forest accepted her without question. The thorns parted. The wind did not resist her passage. She found an abandoned hut deep beyond the fig groves, crumbling, roofless, but standing. The firewood inside was still dry, though no one had lived there for years. She laid Emery down on the softest blanket she could make from moss and shredded cloth. The baby did not cry. Not once. Not when he woke. Not when he slept. He watched her with eyes too calm, too knowing. Like he'd heard stories from the inside of the earth. Like he remembered the womb of soil and still held secrets there. Animals came. First a fox, small and red, who curled near the door and blinked slowly. Then birds, silent ones with black feathers who perched in the rafters. A deer stood outside every morning. A snake made a nest under the bed but never struck. And through it all, the fire pit in the center of the hut never caught flame again. Adama tried flint, sticks, embers from the edge of the village, even coals from a passing caravan's camp. Nothing lit. The moment she stepped into the hut, the flames would die in their cradles. But they were never cold. She and Emery slept warm even through the rains. The air in the hut held a steady heat, like breath on skin. On the night of the 3rd moon, when rain soaked through the trees, Adama stood at the door of the hut and looked into the blackness. She felt her feet ache, and when she looked down she saw lines of soil creeping up her ankles. Not dirt, but tiny root-like tendrils threading beneath the skin. She touched them and saw flashes of memory. Faces she didn't know, women crying, children with leaf crowns. Graves being dug. In her dreams the roots grew faster. They curled around her feet, wound up her calves and whispered in voices low and old. Feed him. Hide him. Listen. She woke one morning with dirt under her nails though she hadn't dug. Emery was always by her side. Awake. Watching. Time passed strangely. The moon cycled again and again, but Emery didn't cry. He didn't babble. He watched, listened, touched things. When a tree split in a storm, he crawled to its broken stump and placed his hand on the wood. It stopped smoking. When Adama once cut her hand on a jagged rock, he touched the wound. The blood slowed. The flesh knit. He was not a child like others. And Adama was not a woman like before. The village began to whisper. Travelers passing by the forest path reported strange sightings. A woman walking barefoot in the rain, never wet. A child glowing faintly at dusk. Trees bending toward the hut in reverence. The stories made it back to the village square and old fears returned. They live, someone whispered. They should not. She brought back something with her. The elders met in secret. One sent a scout to find the hut, but the scout never returned. Another sent fire, lit arrows shot from the ridge. The flames reached the treetops, but when they descended, the wind reversed. Embers blew back toward the archers, setting one's hair alight. They never tried again. In the forest, Emery grew quickly. His eyes darkened like wet earth, and his limbs stretched long and graceful. By his 5th birthday, if time could be trusted, he spoke for the first time. His voice was like cracked stone, quiet, slow but certain. "You are my beginning," he told Adama, touching her cheek. She cried then for the first time since her scream inside the morning pit. "I thought I had ended. You were made again. Below." She held him tightly. Every night, she dreamt of the roots again. They showed her a map, not of places but of stories buried. Secrets under cities. Graves beneath temples. Names erased. And each morning, Emery would rise, silent, and walk into the woods. Animals followed. Plants bloomed at his feet. He never cried. But the trees did sometimes. Resin like tears. One night, when the moon was low and full of rust, Adama woke with her skin buzzing. She rose and found Emery standing outside, hand to the earth. The ground trembled faintly. From below, something groaned, old, deep, not menacing but hungry. "What is it?" she asked. He looked up at her. "They buried too much." She knelt beside him. "And you?" He took her hand. "I will bring it to light." She knew then. He had not come back alone. The nights were no longer quiet. It began with breath. Emery's breath. Adama had always listened to him sleep. She had grown used to the steady, still rhythm of his chest rising and falling, soundless and calm, more like the tide than the breath of a child. But one night, as she lay curled beside him on the moss bedding, she heard something else. A murmur. A flutter of sound beneath the inhale. Words. Not his voice. Older voices coiled inside his lungs like steam trapped in rock. She turned to him, placing her hand on his chest. His heartbeat was normal. But the breath? It whispered. "Wife of soil." She froze. The whisper came again, fainter. "Mother of return." She sat up, heart pounding. The forest was still. The hut walls held tight. But in Emery's exhale was a truth she had never imagined. He was breathing in air from this world, and exhaling language from another. That night she did not sleep. She sat with her knees to her chest, watching the slow rise and fall of her son's chest, listening to the voices rise from it like steam from sacred stones. The words made little sense, but they carried meaning. Praise. Warning. Remembrance. A language not spoken with tongues but with roots and wind and earth. In the days that followed, her dreams deepened. The forest around the hut darkened earlier. Shadows stretched long. She saw the morning pit in her sleep, but not as it was. Instead, it was a mouth yawning open, teeth made of broken bones and a tongue of writhing vines. In the dreams she descended. She always descended. Tunnels earthen, cold, twisting and pulsing like veins. And in those tunnels she was not alone. The walls murmured. Sometimes she walked upright. Other times on all fours. Sometimes she couldn't feel her limbs at all but simply moved, dragged along by something that knew her name before she was born. When she awoke, dirt was always under her fingernails. Emery began speaking more. But it wasn't always to her. Sometimes, he sat at the edge of the garden and spoke softly to the ground. He would tilt his head, nodding as if listening. Once, Adama stepped close and heard him whisper, "I know. She remembers now." Another time, he looked at the fig tree and said, "She's almost ready." She never asked who she was. The forest pulsed with tension. It felt less like a place and more like a waiting. Then the villagers began to hear things too. It started with Sula, the midwife who had delivered Adama's stillborn child all those years ago. One evening, while drawing water from the village well, she dropped her bucket and screamed. She claimed she had heard a baby crying, a weak, high-pitched cry rising from the black depths of the well. No one believed her. Until it happened again. This time to the butcher. Then the baker's son. Soon, children were waking in the middle of the night, saying they heard footsteps beneath their beds. Not in the house, beneath the house. The village carpenter tore up his own floorboards and said the earth beneath was too warm, too soft. The rumors spread like wildfire in dry grass. They say she walks. She never died. She was claimed by the mourning pit. Something came back with her. Something below. The elders called a meeting. They demanded the whispers be silenced. A priest was brought from the northern province, one who specialized in curses and bad omens. He walked the streets with holy smoke and muttered chants under his breath. But the next morning his shoes were found outside the pit's edge, half buried in soil. He was never seen again. Back in the forest, Emery began to draw. He had never been taught. But one day Adama entered the hut and found the floor covered in lines scratched into the dirt. Spirals. Roots. A woman with a crown of thorns and soil. Beneath her, hundreds of hands reaching upward. Some with flowers. Some with fire. "What is it?" she asked him. He looked up, smiling. "What's underneath?" That night she dreamed again. But it was no longer just her dream. She walked the tunnels again, only this time she heard others. Footsteps. Voices. Children's laughter. Breaths quick and curious. People walked beside her, unseen but present. She felt their presence as weightless pressure against her shoulders, like being watched with love. And the whispers were clearer now. Wife of soil. Mother of the breathing dead. She bore him below. She brought us the air. In the morning her feet were stained black with dirt. Her skin smelled like roots. Her breath misted even in the warm morning. In the village fear grew. One woman woke to find ash on her doorstep, shaped like a small handprint. Another claimed her goat began to speak, not in words but in wailing chants. The schoolhouse's chalkboards were covered in drawings none of the children remembered making. Pits, eyes, roots, and always, a woman holding a child, half buried, half born. The villagers began whispering about burning the mourning pit shut. But the elders refused. One remembered the last time they tried something like that. The ground opened and swallowed a storage barn whole. "We cannot seal what breathes," one old man whispered. Adama began carving symbols on her walls. She didn't know where they came from, only that they felt right. Emery helped her, humming as they worked, sometimes whispering words she did not understand. The hut felt alive now, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The animals still came, but they stood further away, reverent. Then one night Emery stood by her bed and said, "It's time to show them." "Show them what?" "What breathes," he said. "What remembers." He took her hand. Together they walked toward the pit. Toward the edge of the village. The earth was waiting. Ask ChatGPT. The man appeared at dusk, carrying nothing but a shovel and a song on his tongue. Adama first saw him as a shape between the trees, broad-shouldered and slow-moving, humming an old tune that twisted strangely in the air. The forest quieted around him, not in fear but in recognition. Even the insects paused their songs. Birds tilted their heads as he passed. When he stepped into the clearing where her hut stood, the wind curled behind him like a loyal dog. He saw her and stopped. "Adama," he said as if tasting the name. "And the boy?" "Emery." She stepped back, heart racing, one hand reaching behind her to touch Emery's shoulder. "Who are you?" He held up empty hands, smile gentle beneath a face worn by dust and years. "Just a man with a shovel," he said. "Kuro. I dig graves." Adama narrowed her eyes. "We don't need graves." "No," he agreed, eyes settling on Emery who stood unmoving beside her. "But you've already climbed out of one." That night, Kuro stayed by the fire, resting on a stone he claimed was older than the village. He did not ask to enter the hut. He made a small pot of tea with herbs from his pack and offered some to her. Adama declined. Emery did too, never looking at the man, his gaze fixed instead on the shadows flickering in the trees. "You're not the first," Kuro said, warming his hands on the cup. "And not the last. Children have come back before. Sometimes still and breathless, sometimes crying. Always for a reason." Adama asked quietly, "What kind of reason?" "Balance," he said. "Correction. Sometimes vengeance. Sometimes mercy. But never by accident. Returnings are the soil's way of settling a weight." She remembered the whispers from Emery's mouth, the dreams, the warm earth beneath her hut. Kuro went on. "The dead don't rise because they want to. They rise because something calls them. And they answer." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But he's my son." He nodded. "And that's why he's still gentle." Emery didn't speak the entire night. Not even when Kuro turned to him and said, "I see you. I know what sleeps beneath your feet." Emery blinked slowly. Then stepped carefully. Kuro smiled. "I always do." Over the next few days the gravedigger stayed. He did not impose, only circled the forest's edge, placing tiny wooden markers in the earth and muttering to himself. He told Adama that the pit beneath the village was shifting, breathing deeper. Something's rising, he warned. When the soil begins to remember, it doesn't always stop at memory. He offered to help them leave. I've buried people across kingdoms, he said. I know quiet places. Places where children born wrong or returned strange can live without fear. We leave tonight if you wish. Adama considered it. Every night brought new whispers. Emery's drawings had begun to pulse faintly, glowing like embers in the dark. One of the trees near their hut now bent slightly toward the earth as if listening. But Emery did not want to go. He smells like turned soil, the boy said, watching Kuro pack his few belongings. Like graves with nothing in them. He's kind, she told him. He knows things, Emery said. But he's hiding something. She asked Kuro about it. He didn't deny it. I'm not here by mistake, he said. I was sent. There are those who watch for these kinds of children. Not everyone wants to harm them, but not everyone wants them free either. He told her about the Ministry of Passing, a secret order of mortals who keep the boundary between the living and dead thin but intact. Some of them want Emery destroyed. Some want him studied. And a few, he looked at her then, eyes dark. A few want him used. Used for what? To speak to the things still buried beneath the mourning pit, he said. Adama shivered. That night, Emery did something he'd never done before. He cried. Not loudly. Not with tears. But with breath, long deep inhales that pushed sorrow into the room like smoke. The air grew heavy. The fire dimmed. And in the middle of it, Emery said, if we leave she will wake angry. Adama touched his face. Who? The one below, he whispered. She listens to me. She waits. Kuro didn't sleep. Adama caught him whispering into the ground, his fingers drawing sigils in the dirt. She stepped outside quietly. Are you planning to take him? She asked. He paused. Only if you ask me to. But you were sent. He didn't answer. The next morning she told him they would not go. Kuro did not argue. He placed a charm of stone and string around Emery's neck and told him, this will not stop her, but it might slow her. Emery looked at him, calm and ancient. You're the one who buries what cannot be killed. I try, Kuro said. Then you've already failed. Kuro left without another word. Adama watched him disappear into the trees. She didn't feel safer. But she felt clearer. That evening the earth beneath her bed pulsed once, not with threat but invitation. Emery looked at her. It's time to go deeper. Adama didn't answer. But she didn't sleep either. Asked ChatGPT. It began with the roots. Tiny at first, hair-thin threads of white that curled out from beneath Adama's feet when she stepped near water, near ash, near any place touched by death or memory. She didn't notice them at first. But Emery did. He pointed without words. His fingers always quiet, always certain. He would touch the earth and then press that hand to her chest, to her belly, to her throat. As if reminding her, it's not just growing, it's reaching. Soon the roots grew faster. Not from trees or shrubs, but from the soil itself, thick and bone-pale, pulsing like veins. She woke one morning to find a web of them under her sleeping mat, rising up the wall, curling around the cooking pot. And then came the animals. The fox was the first. Thin and scarred, it limped into the clearing where Adama and Emery lived in their woven branch shelter. It did not run when it saw them. It approached Emery slowly, eyes wide. And then, unbelievably, it bowed. Lowered its head to the dirt. Whimpered once. Then left. After that came more. Crows that perched low and silent near their fire. A deer that let Emery rest his hand on its flank. Even a vulture circling above only once before drifting off like a watchman dismissed. Adama didn't sleep. She felt something moving in the earth, not crawling, not slithering. Breathing. The trees began to change. They leaned toward Emery, bark split open in long vertical cracks like mouths trying to speak. She saw one tree shed its bark entirely overnight, revealing what underneath shaped like a woman's face. That same night, Emery whispered in his sleep. A word she had never heard but which chilled her bones. OWA. She asked him in the morning what it meant. He only looked at her and said, she is listening. That night, Adama dreamed again of the mourning pit. Only this time she wasn't inside it. She was standing on its rim watching something crawl from its depths. Not a body. Not a spirit. A structure. A ribcage of something long dead, cracking the earth as it surfaced. When she woke, her feet were tangled in white roots that glowed faintly. Later that day, while foraging by the stream, She noticed the earth shifting near the base of a tree. She knelt, brushed back the leaves and saw bone. A rib, long as her arm, curled like a serpent, too smooth and too wrong to belong to any known animal. It wasn't buried. It was growing. And Emery stood behind her, eyes glowing faintly amber. "It's waking," he said, though his mouth didn't move. She turned to him, voice trembling. "What's waking?" "The thing that made the pit. The one that was never supposed to sleep." That evening, thunder cracked without clouds. Fireflies rose early in unnatural spirals, clustering around Emery's shoulders like crowns. When he sat near the fire, it didn't flicker, it flared wide and tall without heat. Adama watched in stunned silence. Then she asked, "Is this your doing?" "No," he answered softly. "But it's because of me. I'm open." She pressed her hand to his chest. His heartbeat was slow, deep, not like a child's. And then he said, "The pit remembers you. It breathed through you. And now I carry what it gave back." Roots began cracking through the floor of their hut. From the trees, bark fell like peeling skin. The soil turned red in patches as if stained with old blood. Emery drew spirals in the ash around their shelter. That night, when Adama stepped outside, the moonlight revealed what looked like ribs piercing through the soil in a circle. 7 of them. Each pointing inward. Each taller than her. And in the middle of the circle, Emery stood. "I'm not just your son," he said. "I'm her mouth, her lungs, her memory." Adama wept, not from fear, but from the understanding that something ancient had chosen her to carry its return. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice shaking. "But you listened," Emery replied. "And that was enough." The trees bowed low as if in mourning. The soil pulsed beneath their feet. And somewhere deep below them, the mourning pit exhaled. Ask ChatGPT. Kuro arrived just after sunset, his face streaked with sweat and something darker, soil that didn't wash off. He didn't speak right away. He stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at Emery, who sat on a low stump humming to the fire. The flames moved with him, not upward but outward, licking the air as if dancing to a rhythm no one else could hear. Adama stood slowly, brushing dirt from her palms. "What did you see?" Kuro looked past her. "It's begun." "What has?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the fire and dropped to one knee. He pulled a cloth from his satchel. Inside were fragments of headstones, splinters of coffins, and something else, soil writhing as though filled with breath. "It's not just the mourning pit anymore," he said, voice hoarse. "The ground is moving. Graves are sinking. Whole cemeteries, gone. Bones pulled down like fish dragged into mud. I watched the grave of a chief's daughter collapse in on itself, like the earth was swallowing shame." Adama's breath caught. "And Emery?" Kuro looked at the boy, his expression equal parts awe and fear. "He hums the same tune the earth is groaning." It began soon after. At first, Adama thought it was coincidence. Women appearing at the edge of the woods, dusty and dazed, whispering her name, her child's name. But then it became a procession. One by one they came, women with hollow eyes and hands clutched to their chests. Mothers who had buried children, some recently, others decades ago. They had heard whispers. In dreams. In the wind. In the hush between prayers. The voices had led them here. They did not ask for shelter or food. They only asked to see him. Some knelt as Emery approached. Others wept before he reached them. He never spoke. He only touched their palms, their cheeks, and looked into their eyes with something far older than pity. Something like recognition. But not all could bear his gaze. The 7th woman, a mother who had lost twins in infancy, reached out and placed her hand on Emery's head. She smiled at first. Then her skin began to blister. It cracked, split, peeled, not with heat but like bark flaking off a dead tree. She screamed and fell to her knees, cradling her arm as bark-thin sheets of skin fell to the forest floor. Beneath the surface, her flesh shimmered like dark amber. Adama rushed forward, but Emery held up his hand. "She asked to see what was taken," he said. "She saw too much." The other women backed away, some crying, some muttering prayers. The forest felt suddenly heavier. The roots underfoot trembled like nerves twitching. And the air, it carried not wind but a soft thrum as if the land was breathing with them. That night, Adama sat by the fire while Emery slept with one palm to the earth. Kuro sharpened a small blade, not for protection but ritual. "The digging's begun," he said. "What digging?" "Not by hands," Kuro said. "By memory. The land is digging through itself. Unburying what should have never been hidden. And it's using him to remember." Adama shivered. "Can it be stopped?" Kuro looked to the sky. No stars. Only clouds, thick red-edged. No. But it can be guided. Just before dawn the women returned. Not with fear but resolve. They asked no questions, made no demands. They sat in a circle around Emery as he slept. One sang an old lullaby. Another dug her fingers into the soil and began to weep. The forest listened. And somewhere far below, the mourning pit pulsed once like a heartbeat, steady, rising, waking. It began with a sound. Not thunder. Not wind. But something older, a low, cracking groan that made the trees bow and the soil buckle like breath held too long. Adama jolted awake, heart hammering. The women around the clearing were already stirring, eyes wide in terror and awe. The air buzzed, electric and heavy, pressing against their lungs. And then the ground split. A long, jagged crack snaked its way through the clearing, and from its depths rose a mist that glowed faintly, not with heat but with memory. The soil didn't crumble. It unfolded like a door opening inward. From beneath they came. Figures. Dozens. Then hundreds. Pale and dust-covered, draped in burial cloth that moved like smoke. Some limped. Some crawled. Others walked with impossible grace as though they had forgotten what weight was. Their eyes were dark, endless. Their faces, young, old, ageless, all bore the same look, recognition. They were not rotting. They were not corpses. But they were not alive. They emerged slowly, reverently, each holding something in their hands, petals, stems, full blossoms sculpted from ivory-white bone, flowers, roses of rib, lilies of finger joints, thorned vines of vertebrae. And they sang. Not with voices, with vibration. With breathless melody that rose from the ground and trembled through bones. Adama fell to her knees. And in the center of them, walking barefoot over the cracked soil, was Emery. His skin shimmered faintly, lit from within. His eyes glowed soft amber. The bone flowers did not wilt in his presence. They bent toward him like sunflowers to morning. The figures parted as he passed, heads bowed. He did not speak. But Adama heard him all the same. They are not lost. They are not wrong. They are only waiting. The procession circled the clearing once, slow and reverent. One child, no more than 5, stepped forward, cradling a skull no larger than a fist. She placed it at Adama's feet and smiled, though her lips did not move. Adama touched the skull. It was warm. Another woman came next, her face veiled, her fingers long and elegant. Her spine curved like roots. She whispered into Emery's ear, though no sound emerged. Emery nodded and turned to Adama. She says the silence was a lie, he said. They were never gone. Just buried beneath shame. The ground trembled again. And from the split in the earth, a great sound rose, a heartbeat. Massive, slow, eternal. The forgotten moved with it, swaying in rhythm. The bone flowers began to glow. The women watching from the edges wept openly. Some reached out. Some collapsed. One crawled forward and embraced one of the figures, and for a brief moment their forms merged. A memory returned, a pain released. Emery stood in the center of it all, not a child, not a god, but a bridge. A truth made flesh. He looked to Adama, calm. I walk both worlds, he said softly. Above and beneath. Breathing and breathless. Born and unburied. Adama whispered, and me? He smiled, sad and loving. You called them. With your scream. With your hands in the dirt. You were the first voice the ground heard. One by one the bone procession returned to the earth. Not vanishing but descending, petals laid like offerings, bones left like seeds. The cracks sealed behind them as if it had never been. Only the flowers remained. Only the silence after a song. Adama woke before dawn, her heart already grieving. The forest was silent in the way it gets before something breaks. No wind. No bird calls. Just that strange hush, as though even the trees were holding their breath. Emery slept beside her, curled peacefully, one hand over his chest. He hadn't aged like other children. In 5 years he'd only grown a little, yet his eyes held centuries. He spoke less now, but when he did it echoed, not with volume but with weight. His laughter frightened birds. His gaze calmed animals. His footsteps no longer made prints in soft ground. Adama had begun to fear him. Not because he was cruel, he wasn't. He was kind. Too quiet, and too connected to the pit. He knew things she hadn't taught him. The names of buried women. The scent of bones. He whispered in his sleep in languages she had never heard. He had stopped calling her mother. Now he called her first breath. She kissed his brow gently, packed her bundle in silence, and walked him toward the mourning pit. He didn't resist. In the clearing, the earth still bore the scar of the procession. Bone flowers had not rotted. The ground shimmered faintly like skin over something alive. Adama knelt beside the rim. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You were never meant to carry this." She laid him gently on the soil, wrapped in a cloth of her own weaving, just as she had when she first held him. "I returned what was taken," she said to the air. "Please, let him go." The earth was silent. For a moment. Then it pulsed. Beneath Emery's back the soil darkened. A tremor rolled out like breath, not violent, gentle. Like lungs filling. And then, with no wind to move it, the bone flowers bent, not toward Emery but toward her. She felt the truth settle in her bones like cold water. It wasn't Emery the earth wanted. It was her. Her blood had screamed first. Her body had broken open and called something to the surface. The pit had chosen a mother. Adama closed her eyes. She kissed Emery's forehead one last time, then lay beside him, curling toward the center of the pit. She tucked herself into the dirt like a seed. "I'm ready," she whispered. The ground opened beneath her like a mouth. It was not painful. It was warm, vast, and wet with memory. She felt herself sink, not just in body but in thought. She remembered every child the village had buried, every scream muffled in grief, every silence that hardened into myth. She let go. But before the soil could close over her fully, a hand grasped her wrist. Tiny. Warm. Emery. He was not crying. He was not panicked. But his hand held firm. He looked down at her and said softly, "Not yet." The pit shuddered. And recoiled. A breath surged upward. The ground beneath Adama lifted, pushed her upward like a birth. Dirt spilled from her mouth as she gasped. Alive, pulled from the earth by the very thing she had offered herself to. She clung to Emery, trembling. He laid a hand on the soil and whispered something in a language she didn't know. The pit stopped moving. But it still breathed. Beneath them the land was not satisfied. But it had been heard. Adama held her son and looked at him with new understanding. He had not been returned as a curse. He was a covenant. Between breath and burial. Between the mothers who screamed and the children who never cried. She wrapped her arms around him and sat with him on the trembling earth. The pit would not take either of them that day. It had chosen to remember instead. They call her many names now. The vine-wrapped mother. The whisper between roots. The first breath. But those are only echoes of her true name, one carried by the soil and softened by rain. In the village that once buried her, no one speaks that name aloud, not out of fear but reverence. Adama walks the forest still. Her child, Emery, now tall and slender, moves like mist behind her, vines curled lovingly around his arms, leaves growing from the creases of his palms. He speaks little. He listens to the wind, to the groaning trees, to the buried things that never sleep. Together, they drift along the boundary of what the village dares remember. She no longer walks with steps. Her feet hover just above the moss and roots, never again burdening the earth that once tried to consume her. The villagers say it is because the soil remembers her sacrifice, and now refuses to hold her weight. The mourning pit is sealed. Thick, tangled roots grew over it in the years that followed. The forest reclaims. The trail leading there is lost beneath bramble and thorn, and even the boldest hunters will not go near it. Sometimes, on moonless nights, dogs whimper and paw at the ground as if something beneath is stirring again. No one dares dig. But during heavy rains, when the forest runs with brown rivers and the village gutters overflow, faces appear in the mud. Pale, open-eyed, mouths gently parted, not in horror but in longing. Some claim they move as though trying to breathe. A few swear they've heard laughter just beneath the thunder. And others say the ground sighs. The elders do not speak of these things. But the mothers do. Mothers leave flowers now, not at graves but at the forest's edge. Wild blossoms or plucked garden petals, or crude wreaths woven by shaking hands. Some leave letters tucked inside bark. Some press their foreheads to the soil and whisper names only they remember. And the forest listens. Sometimes the petals disappear. Sometimes they return days later, ash-streaked but whole. Children who are born silent are carried there by midwives, just close enough for the wind to brush their faces. Most begin to cry. Some don't, but their hearts beat steady and their lungs open later under stars. When asked why they do this, the women say only, because the wind remembers the scream she gave back to us. The stories grow over time, shaped like vines over stone. They say Adama walks between worlds now, not alive in the way others are but not dead either. She belongs to something deeper. The kingdom beneath. A realm of roots and breath, where the lost are cradled in loam and lullabies, where every buried mother still hums. It is said she guards the border between silence and return, that she speaks for those whose voices were never heard, that her son, the boy who never cried, has grown into something neither god nor ghost but necessary. No church honors her. No elder writes her tale. But in every whispered lullaby passed from mother to child, a single word returns again and again. A word barely heard, carried on the breath between syllables. Alive. A promise. A warning. The truth. And when the wind is strong and the rain heavy enough to soften even the deepest stones, the villagers listen closely. They put their ears to the earth. Sometimes they hear breathing. Ask ChatGPT.